committed to appointing Supreme Court justices who are committed to reversing these decisions. Are you? Are you? And by the way, I will believe a corporation is a person when Texas executes a corporation. So in other words, the cynicism directly flows from all of the money and the sense of corruption. And people say, well, what can I possibly do? And then on top of that, you've got, a never-ending stream of poison from Fox News and Rush Limbaugh and the hate. You see what's going on, and it's important that we squarely deal with this. It's not just cynicism, it's also the divide and conquer. Because you've got demagogues, starting with Fox News and hate radio, and right into a lot of the regressive Republican, precincts, and what they're doing is they're saying, your frustration, your anger, your cynicism, I understand it. You know why? It's because of them. And then they point the finger of blame at who? At the immigrants, or the people of color, or the union members, or unions, or government itself. You see, it's all that venom and all that hate. They're capitalizing on the frustration and anger that so many Americans right now have, and they're using the politics of resentment to divide us. So to take our economy back, to take our democracy back, what we've got to do is not only overcome the cynicism, but what we have to do is pull people together again. We have the numbers. We have the majority. We have the capacity. We've got to overcome their ability to sow cynicism and also hate and resentment. It's not going to be easy. Americans want truth-telling. They want authenticity. They want to know what is happening. They want to know why they are not getting ahead, and they want to know the truth. You are all organizers, whether you call yourself an organizer or not. You all know how to organize and mobilize and animate and educate. You know that. And the 9 months ahead, up until the primaries, and then beyond that, right up to the election, and then beyond that, right through 2017 and 18 and 19 and 20, this is not easy, but we are on the cusp. We are of a new progressive movement. You are in the vanguard of a new progressive movement. It is happening. The fight for 15, the McDonald's fast food workers, the Walmart workers, the fight against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which, as Larry said, is a travesty. It's a travesty. It's NAFTA on steroids. It's ridiculous. As Larry said, ask the candidates as they come through, are you, and particularly Hillary, are you going to support the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is going to even create fewer good jobs, erode wages, and also allow global companies to attack our health, safety, environmental, labor, financial regulations? Are you really in favor of that? It's you on the front line. That's why I came to Iowa. It's you. I'm here because I believe in you. And I need you, and the country needs you. So don't let us down. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now we have time. We have time for questions. Thank you. Thank you. We have time. We have time for your. We have time for some questions. I've got to run off at 4 and get a plane. But let's discuss some of this. Let's have your questions. Anybody? And I'll repeat the question. So yes, right here. What? Wait a minute. Let's just do this in some reasonable order here. Yes. Okay. Can I explain the Trans-Pacific Partnership a little bit more, since none of us have been able to read it? I know about it only because a lot of it has been leaked. You know, Edward Snowden. And what I know from the leakage, and I've also talked to a number of members of Congress, who they are having a hard time getting a hold of it because it's a classified document. It's classified for absolutely no good reason. But it's classified. But I can tell you what's in it. Basically, it has stronger intellectual property protections for pharmaceuticals. That means that pharmaceutical companies can keep their patents longer and guarantee their patents in other countries. Number 2, it creates a special court, if you will, a kind of a out of any nation's jurisdiction, a special tribunal that allows global companies, even US-based global companies, to come there and basically say, we have been injured because this country's health or safety or environmental or labor or financial regulations have crimped our profits. And we, therefore, should be reimbursed by that country for the profits we've lost. And the tribunal members, who knows how they're going to be appointed? Probably by the same big corporations that created the tribunal in the first place. Already, we have tobacco companies around the world using a similar provision that has been baked into other treaties to go after anti-smoking legislation in developing countries. And then we have, obviously, provisions that make it easier to move jobs abroad. Because, you see, the more you protect the financial and physical assets of American companies abroad, the cheaper it becomes for them to outsource jobs. So if you think of this really as not a trade agreement, this is an investment agreement. And the president is justifying it now as, you know, and by the way, I think, and you may disagree with me or agree with me, I think Barack Obama will be known as one of the best presidents we've ever had. I really believe that. But on certain issues, he's wrong. And this is one of the issues that he is wrong on. And it's a big wrong. It's not just a small wrong. And we've got to raise our voices very loudly, and particularly if Hillary Clinton. You know, did I tell you, I once dated Hillary Clinton. I mean, before she was married. Do you want to know more about this? I don't think we have the time. You don't really want to know about this. Well, she was in college. She was president of her freshman class, and I was president of my sophomore class. We were at different colleges, and I suggested a presidential summit. And she came to my college, and we saw a movie. It was Antonioni's Blow Up. Do you remember that movie? And now fast forward to 2008. In 2008, I got a call from the New York Times. A reporter at the New York Times said, you know, we found a collection of her letters from college, and she mentions she went out on a date with you. And is there anything that you can tell me about that date that might shed light on how she will function as a president? So with my tongue firmly planted in my cheek, because it was such an absurd question, I said, well, all I remember is that she wanted what seemed to be an absurd amount of butter on her popcorn. And then there was silence. And I thought he had hung up. I said, hello? And he said, I said, are you still there? He said, oh, yes, I'm just writing this down. Any other questions? Yes. How do we get more people to vote? Well, this is part of the same issue of overcoming cynicism. That is, people came out in 2008. And I think the argument you've got to make with Bernie and with Hillary and with anybody else is that the only way you're going to get people out is if they're enthusiastic. And the only way they're going to be enthusiastic is if the candidate actually speaks the truth and comes up with real, things that people believe in and can get around and can rally behind. I mean, if we, the last election we just had, the midterms, we had the lowest turnout in this country we've had since, as a percentage of eligible voters, since 1942. And the thing about 1942 is that about a third of our eligible voters were overseas and couldn't vote. So that's saying something. Yes. Which bill? Well, I think that let me say two things about that. One is that One is that you've got to give these candidates the courage of their conviction by delivering the message I just delivered. Because they, once you are a candidate, and Bernie's a good friend, and Hillary's a good friend, and I know, I don't know many of the Republicans, that's true. But you just have to hammer home to them the message I just gave you. The other thing that's very important, and you can never forget this, is you must not set yourself up to think of the next president as the savior. Because I don't know about you, I've fallen for that almost too many times now. Because the more we think that the next president, if we get him or her elected, is the Messiah, the more we are going to be disappointed. Nobody can do it alone. Nobody can do it. Everybody, any human being has got to, yes, you set direction and you try to inspire people, but you've got to have people mobilized behind you to get anything done. I mean, even in the presidential election of 1936, and I don't remember that election personally, but even in the presidential election of 1936, Franklin D. Roosevelt was asked by a constituent, Mr. President, if I re-elect you, if I vote for you for re-election and you are re-elected, I want you to do this, 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 and this, a list of 5 things. And he turned to this constituent and said, ma'am, if I'm re-elected, I want to do all of those things, but you must make me. And he meant, even in the depths of the Depression, people had to be mobilized and organized and energized and activated. And so our job does not end with a president being elected. And I think too often we think it does. It just begins. We have time for a couple more. Yep. Am I ever threatened by the wealthy? What are they going to do to me? I mean, what are they going to do? I actually did once in my office and also at home, same day, I got an envelope with powder in it. Seriously. No, I'm serious. And I turned it over to the FBI, and about 3 months later I heard, 3 months later, I heard that it was talcum powder. 3 months, I thought, God, I'm not long for this world. But no, don't ever, anybody here, be afraid to speak the truth. Don't be afraid. You know, if I sometimes in my paranoid moments, I think, well, one reason that workers have so little job security any longer, and anybody can be fired for the slightest provocation or for no reason at all, and why students have so much debt and are so worried about the future, and immigrants are so worried about people in their family who might be deported because they're undocumented. Why there's so much worry is because the powers up there want to intimidate us. But that's only in my paranoid fantasies. Yes. How do I feel about the war on drugs? Well, I don't like the war on drugs, and I think that we ought to do exactly what Colorado and Washington have done. And we've also got to get people out of, we've got to decriminalize so that we don't have all of these people going to prison. Yeah. Well, it fits in the progressive. How does the war on terror and foreign policy in the Middle East fit in the war on terror? A couple of ways. Number one, we're spending $750 billion a year on the military. That is more than the 10 next largest military budgets, including Russia and China, together. There is no good reason why we have to spend that much, and we can maintain our national security on much less. The bloat is there. It is, when I talked about the big banks and I talked about pharmaceuticals, I could easily also have talked about military contractors. They're another, and Eisenhower knew that. Eisenhower was talking about that. I mean, we forget. I mean, Ike even looks good now. At the time, I thought he was sort of an old fuddy-duddy and right wing. So that's one thing. The second thing we've got to keep in mind is that the same people who advised George W. Bush to go into Iraq are now advising a bunch of these Republican candidates. They have never been held accountable, these people. And we've got to hold them accountable. You know, why is Wolfowitz back there advising Jeb? Yes, way up there. Yes, way up there. Yes. Well, I would say 15, and I'll tell you why. Not only, I also already gave you the argument, the economic argument, in terms of the living wage and also maintaining the 1968 minimum wage and productivity improvements. And also, when people have more money in their pockets, they'll turn around and they'll spend it, and that has a multiplier effect that creates more jobs. And also, we know there have been a lot of empirical work that when employers raise their wages to the range of $12 or $13, and it will be soon 15 adjusted for inflation, they also have less turnover because it attracts more people into the labor market, and they have more choice of whom to choose for work. So there are a lot of good economic arguments. There are good political arguments. One political argument is if we choose 15, we'll end up with 12. So, but always choose high. Most Americans want the minimum wage raised significantly. And this is true. We had 4 states in the midterm elections, Arkansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, and Alaska, all had minimum wage increases on their ballots. They all agreed. They all are red states. They approved those minimum wage increases. The Democrats running in those states, they lost. They didn't even talk about the minimum wage. I mean, it's very popular. When I went in 1996 to Bill Clinton and said, we should raise the minimum wage, we haven't done it in years, and he said, really? Do you think so? I said, yes, we'll do a poll. And he turned to Dick Morris, one of the worst people in America, who was then his pollster. And Dick Morris did a poll overnight. He came to me the next morning. He was amazed. He said 85% of Americans want the minimum wage increased. I don't know how, to this day, Dick Morris did overnight polls so quickly. I think he polled his family. That's what he did. But we took there were other polls that showed it wasn't just the Dick Morris poll, but this is incredibly popular. Most Americans believe in 3 fundamental moral principles. And that's let me end on this. And this is Democrats, Republicans, this is right across the board. This is 80% by poll after poll by poll, focus group poll, 3 basic fundamental moral principles. Number 1, I mentioned, nobody should work full-time and be in poverty or their family. That's really broadly accepted. Number 2, everybody should have an opportunity to make the most of their native God-given talents and abilities. That's why education is popular. Even though we're fighting a lot bad like education, most people don't think we're testing too much. We are testing too much. Most people actually think teachers should be paid more. And the third moral principle, and I'll end on this one, is that we should not have a privileged aristocracy in this country. This is something the founding fathers of our republic understood and fought for in the Revolution and beyond. But we are on the way to creating a permanent privileged aristocracy. And that's why raising the inheritance tax back to what it was in the 1990s is so important. That's why we need to bust up the big banks. That's why we need campaign finance limits and reform. We've got to prevent a permanent privileged aristocracy from forming in this country. These are basic moral principles that everybody agrees to. Thank you all. Good luck. Good night.